Trump shrinks Indonesia's 32% tariff to 19% and scores 19.5 billion in energy, farm goods, and 50 Boeings. But is this trade win or a pay-to-play scheme? Watch the full video to see why this deal may cost more than it's worth.
Yeah. But when we go forward and we start looking at ways to fix things, President Trump has signed or is looking at landing that deal with Indonesia. Gary, I believe you and I spoke about this where we said, my comment was, look, these deals are going to be structured with either India or Vietnam, but the dark horse in the race is Indonesia, because they have a lot to gain, and we have a lot to gain because they control this very important thing when you look at Indonesia, Malaysia, and the like of the Strait of Malacca, when we think about China and the strategic nature behind it. So when you look at the Indonesia deal, is it a good deal? Is it one that is going to be the model going forward for some of these other nations?
I think it is. And personally, I love this deal. I think it's great for the United States. It's going to work out well for Indonesia. Let's talk about some of the details here. So President Trump and Indonesia's president reached terms on a new tariff deal. This lowers President Trump's original Liberation Day April tariff rate of 32% to 19%. Indonesia's rate on U.S. imports is 0. Now, for people saying, wait, that's not fair, fair enough, it may not be, but there's a huge trade imbalance here, and this is trying to even it out. The deal also includes an Indonesian agreement to purchase $15 billion of U.S. energy products, $4.5 billion of American farm products, and 50 Boeing jets, including several 777s. I have no idea how many billions of dollars that is, but it is a gigantic number. Indonesia is also a major exporter of resources like copper, which we need. And that opens an avenue for the U.S. to access copper from Southeast Asia. So the whole point of all this deal is, on our end, it's going to reduce the $18 billion trade deficit the U.S. has with Indonesia. Indonesia avoids the 32% tariff disaster that they saw coming. And that part, that works for everybody. Now, one thing I want to read here, Mark, this was written by one of our interns. I did not edit it. I'm amazed with some of these 19-year-old kids, right? It is genius. Just for clarity, I didn't write this, but a 19-year-old wrote it. I thought it was genius. They wrote, "This deal is not about trade. It's about President Trump turning the American consumer base into a monetized asset. Indonesia agreed to spend billions to dodge a 32% tariff. There's no enforcement or timeline, only a promise in exchange for market access. President Trump did not lower tariffs. He sold the privilege of being tariffed less." And I think that, this is a 19, our interns are amazing. That was written by one of them. I think it's a fantastic way to think about it. One of the things that we've praised President Trump for many times on this show is the way he's acted as an advocate for U.S. industries. This man has flown all over the world making deals for foreign countries to buy huge amounts of U.S. product. He had a Middle Eastern tour earlier this year. He came back with trillions of dollars of purchase orders. I think that's phenomenal. Why aren't more of our politicians acting as advocates for our own companies, for our own industries, for our own workers? I like that. I think we can expect more buy your way in deals ahead. A lot of people in the media are making taco jokes. It's the Trump always chickens out jokes, but they should be more focused on the massive purchase orders the president keeps bringing in for U.S. companies. I like this deal. I think it's good for the U.S. I think Indonesia's relieved that they don't have a 32% tariff to deal with. And I think we're going to see more deals like this. This is going to be the model that other countries are going to follow for access to the U.S. market. What's your view on this?
Well, it's interesting because you talk about how, well, we have 0, they have to pay. And it's like, isn't that unfair? And the one thing I want to point out is the LCR, and that's the local content requirement.
Yeah.
Because when people were looking at what Trump was doing, which was, it seemed a little less structured than it should have been. But when you look at what he was doing, everyone's like, well, the tariffs aren't that bad. It's like, but what is the local content requirement? What is the trade-related investment measure, which is also, or TRIM? And there's different ways to create restrictions without just saying you pay a tariff. And the LCR, which is the local content requirement, every country has it to a degree where the government has to procure something that is 25% locally created, or an electronic, or a car, or, a shirt, or anything of that nature. You have to have a certain amount built in country. Now, if you look, and one of the things, I believe it's now not these shoes, when you look at some of the things, we have a lot of manufacturing that has moved to Indonesia, it's moved to Malaysia, Vietnam. And so we are already meeting that local content requirement, but we're giving that production, we're protecting that production to stay there, providing those jobs, providing that opportunity, but we need something in return because we're meeting that local content requirement by not manufacturing the US, manufacturing in Indonesia, but then we have to recover some of that coming home. But to the point that I think was brought up by that very intelligent 19-year-old, is we are a source. Like if you think about what China was selling in 2010, 2011, 2012, it's, oh, do a deal with us and you gain volume. Give up margin, we'll give you volume. And it never materialized. And what do we know about the US? And we've talked about it. It's like we need a different culture of spending, which was really created during the 70s and 80s and well into the 90s of just, don't worry, act irrational and we'll spend money. That still holds the course at the moment. So you're getting access to that huge market, and that market that really wants some of the quality, because Southeast Asia does create some better quality than some of the things that have come from China. You do have some of that opportunity. And I do think that this is a friendly framework because, and then if you look, and you can Google China building their brand new dam, which is in Tibet. There's a lot of fear when you look at coming into Southeast Asia, because some people will say, oh, they signed the ASEAN deal, the ASEAN deal with China. It's like, well, there's still fear there. There's still, what is China going to do? Why are they fishing in our neck of the woods? Why are they damming up water that's coming down into these nations? And obviously, Indonesia is a separate part of that. But when you look at where things are, there's a lot of concern in terms of where China sits versus where India into the Middle East corridor, into Israel, into Europe in the West. That seems like a better route, but you want to play, two sides against the middle. And I think this is an important move to say to China, hey, you keep doing this, we're going over here, and we will get the volume we want. We will get the access to the markets that we crave, because this is a market that we know is established and is going to continue to spend as such.
Mark, I think you make a fantastic point about geopolitics, which again are always complicated. Go back to, the previous topic where we were talking about strategic thinking. It's simply the act of thinking what happens next. And China has been behaving in increasingly aggressive ways in the Pacific. They've been building islands. They've been claiming territorial waters that had never belonged to them. They're encroaching on multiple countries, including the Philippines, and laying siege to actually one of the Philippines islands. And, those countries do not want to be at China's mercy. And, if the U.S. disengages from that part of the world, which we're not doing, that puts those countries at China's mercy and leaves us at odds with that whole part of the world. But if, as you point out, President Trump and the United States can bring the U.S. closer to some of those trading partners, it alleviates some of the pressure that they're feeling with China and puts us in a position to have better relations with countries that are natural adversaries of China. And that's not a bad place to be. And by the way, for people who are saying, oh, no, it doesn't work that way, take a look at what China is doing in Mexico, and particularly in South America, right? China is doing, and Central America as well. China is doing everything they can to establish a foothold pretty much on our southern border and in our hemisphere, and to exert undue influence on our natural trading partners. If we don't do the same, China will have an increasing amount of power and control. We don't need to give that up. We just need to do advantageous deals with China's local competitors. And I think the way you're talking about it is a really strategic way of thinking about these issues.
And to your point, China has gone after those water. You have the Three Gorges Dam, you have the new one, which is going to take. And I love how some people are like, well, it's only 30% of India and Bangladesh's water. It's like, 30% is a big number when you think about the way water flows. And you've seen a lot of those issues when you look into Vietnam and to others, and everyone's looking at what is the way out. What is the alternative? And I think stepping up and providing that alternative is paramount, especially with someone that is blessed with copper and others, because we also need to get strategic, and by us I mean the US, in terms of where are we investing in mines, where are we investing in not only just the mines themselves, but the refinement. You can't just take copper out of the ground and throw it in a wire. You have to process it, you have to smelt it, you have to do different things to it. And for the environmentalists here, it's not the cleanest. It's gotten better, but do we want that here, or do we want to pay for someone else to do it and then ship in the final product? So there's a lot of this means of, let's look at the supply chain and be smart about where we're investing and the deals that we're doing to ensure the whole supply chain is protected. And we do have this very important thing known as our naval assets that help us, say, hey, if you come along with us, we have that protection, we have that support that we can provide to keep those trade lanes open.
Yeah, it's a great point. I think it's a really smart way to think about it. And when people talk about these trade deals, they rarely talk about the kinds of influence you're talking about. But I guarantee you, it's something that people in Congress are thinking about or should be thinking about.